Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Thank you all. It means so much to me that all of you are here and care so much about my adopted state of Michigan here on the West Shore that everyone else in the world calls the Eastern Shore, and in the city of Muskegon, where I make my home just 2 blocks away in the Amazon building. Working with the extraordinary musicians of the West Michigan Symphony is quite a joy and one of the great pleasures of my life, and I look forward to many wonderful years in this part of the world. My talk today is called Small City, Big Idea, and I hope to show how a big idea can transform a small organization like the West Michigan Symphony and maybe transform a small city like Muskegon. When I first announced my intention to move to Muskegon to work with the symphony, my move was greeted with skepticism. A lot of people said to me, "What are you doing? You know, someone like you who's worked all over the world, you've got a reputation, many different places. Why would you think of living in a place like this?" People said that to me for years. They still do. And it's worth noting that every single person who's ever said that to me lives in Muskegon. The answer is, I live in Muskegon because it really values the uplifting qualities of great art. It's a city that for 70 years has proudly supported a symphony orchestra. And that says a lot about a place, yeah. Savannah, Georgia, where I used to work, does not currently have a symphony orchestra. Honolulu, where I got my professional start just as an assistant conductor, does not currently have a symphony orchestra. Detroit, you know, for 6 months didn't have a symphony orchestra. And even Cleveland, which has one of the greatest orchestras in the whole world, is this close to not being able to support it. But Muskegon, for 70 years, has been able to support a symphony orchestra, and a good one, too. I'm very proud of that. I want to tell you a story about our symphony that I think has never been told before, and I hope it will explain to some extent why I live here and provide some parallels for this city. The West Michigan Symphony began as the West Shore Symphony, a community orchestra 70 years ago, just people who liked to play. And over the years it improved, got better and better, and by the time I arrived it was playing really quite well, thanks to the very good shepherding of my predecessor, Murray Gross, and Philip Greenberg before him. But still, it was a mixed bag of musicians. Some had lots of professional experience and lots of other opportunities to perform besides the West Shore Symphony, and others did not. Others, really, this was their only musical outlet. Some of them had auditioned for their positions, and some had not auditioned. So that was the situation I walked into, a real mixed bag, when the board of directors asked me to take this orchestra to the next level and beyond. I still remember them saying it that way, and try to bring it to world-class level here in West Michigan. Well, right away, this disparity in ability became very apparent in rehearsal. And it gradually dawned on me that some of the musicians, not all, but some of them, were relying on me as a conductor, not just for a unified interpretation of the music, and not even just for inspiration, but actually to teach them their notes in rehearsal. And in other words, many of them did not prepare their music a whole lot in advance of all getting together. Well, I decided to set a new standard. And I said things were different now, and from now on, the musicians would all be expected to master their music, absolutely master it, before showing up together to play. Now, by master the music, what I mean is that they would perform it, or let's say practice it, in such a way that if they had to give a recital for their family, friends, and their peers who they really respected, they would feel proud of what they could play. This came to a head in 2003, and I vividly remember the first rehearsal for Sibelius Symphony No. 2, which is one of the hardest pieces we've ever played. I walked into that rehearsal and it just sounded awful. And you know, this is the first rehearsal. You expect it to not be perfect, but it was clear that not too many people had taken me very seriously in what I was asking for. I was really upset and very frustrated, and I realized that this rehearsal could go one of 2 ways. Either I could show my frustration, frustrate them too, and end up accomplishing nothing. Or I could treat them the same way I had treated my high school youth orchestra 20 years before and take them note by note through the rehearsal, but with a positive attitude. I decided to do the latter, and at the end of the rehearsal, several musicians came up to me and said, "Thank you so much, that was the best rehearsal in 2 years." Well, of course, I went home devastated. And I ended up sitting down and writing a letter, and this is what it said among other things. It said, at the next rehearsal, the person in your chair will be responsible for playing their notes to the best of their ability. That's non-negotiable. And hopefully, the person in your chair will be you. Well, this set off a firestorm, as you might expect. Many of the musicians suddenly felt that their positions were vulnerable, and they had meetings to protest what I was doing to them. I even got anonymous emails talking about how I was destroying the orchestra. Now, during that time, I had two charges leveled at me. One of them is very familiar to any leader that comes from out of town and tries to make a difference in a small city. And it's this: oh, he's not going to stay long. He's just using us as a stepping stone. Don't pay any attention to anything he says, because he may be really good, but he's going to be gone soon. And then a few years later, when the person's still there, what? He's still here with us? How good could he be? The second complaint that was leveled at me was, stop trying to turn this orchestra into the Grand Rapids Symphony. We don't need another Grand Rapids Symphony. We can never be the Grand Rapids Symphony. Stop trying to turn us into that. To which my answer was, and still is, I am not trying to create another Grand Rapids Symphony. With all due respect, I'm trying to create another Berlin Philharmonic. Now, the Berlin Philharmonic is almost universally recognized as the greatest orchestra in the world. Talk about preparation. You know, that orchestra, when they learn their music, it is so ingrained that they can spend 90% of their energy directed outwards toward the other people in the group. And it's amazing what an effect that can create. When I finished college, I studied in Berlin for 2 years, and I was lucky enough to join the chorus of the Berlin Philharmonic. So for 2 years, I got to make music with the greatest orchestra in the world under the batons of the world's greatest conductors. Now, it's almost as if these musicians have their nervous systems connected by wires from one side of the stage to the other. Before they play, they all breathe, and when the orchestra breathes, the entire body rises and falls like a single-celled organism. It's astounding to watch. They cue themselves and each other before they play, all the way across the stage. They sing through the music, the beauty of their soul. Their rhythm is so intricately subdivided, so when we hear them playing 1, 2, 3, 4, what they're thinking inside is 1 ta ta ta, 2 ta ta ta, 3 ta ta ta, 4 ta ta ta. And what that accomplishes is that the most intricate and complex rhythms end up coming off perfectly together. They listen like crazy across the stage, making sure not to play too loudly or too softly, and making sure they're always accompanying the melody, not drowning it out, and also that they're following the melody exactly together. They watch each other and they watch the conductor, every little move. They sustain the phrases. They're so committed passionately from the first note of the phrase all the way to the end, and they feel every note to the depths of their soul. So, and most amazing of all, the musicians of the Berlin Philharmonic are not, person for person, the greatest musicians on earth. And that's really quite incredible. Person for person, the New York Philharmonic could play circles around them. But when the Berlin Philharmonic get together as an orchestra, they are unassailably the greatest orchestra in the world. The whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts. That's what I want to create here. So when I had what will now be universally referred to as the year of the brouhaha back in 2003, at the next rehearsal, I said to the orchestra, you know, don't get me wrong, it's not about being the best musician in the world. It's about wanting to be part of the best orchestra in the world. And that's a very, very different thing. It means, at a bare minimum, preparing your part as well as you would prepare it if you were suddenly part of the Berlin Philharmonic. How well would you prepare before that first rehearsal if you knew that you were going to be performing with the Berlin Philharmonic? What if everyone in the orchestra did that at the same time? Obviously, you'd be preparing to the nth degree. I'm not judging anyone based on their natural ability. All I ask is that they prepare to the pinnacle and play at the pinnacle of their ability. I said, if you do that, we'll be fine. Now let's make some music. And everyone applauded, all the tension was released, And that Sibelius Symphony No. 2 I still remember as one of the great concerts that we've ever performed. Of course, this new way of doing things didn't go over well with everybody. After that concert, some people quit on the spot. Other people stayed on for a while and then realized that the time required for them to prepare to that level was more than they were willing to give out of their busy lives on their own time. And I totally respect that. To this day, the West Michigan Symphony includes some musicians who technically are extremely facile and could play anything with very little preparation, and others who need 50 times as much time before arriving together with the group. But they come up with the same result. Either way is fine with me. We end up with a phenomenal orchestra. If there's one thing that I want to get across to you today, though, it's that the moment when people quit was one of the most seminal and pivotal and important moments in the history of the West Michigan Symphony. It was a sea change. It allowed positive change to happen. And best of all, some of the biggest naysayers at the time are now some of our biggest boosters. And some of them play, I won't even tell you where they play, but they're in the orchestra. Since that time, we brought on our new president and CEO, the great Carla Hill, who has an astounding vision of her own. And we have changed our name from the West Shore Symphony to the West Michigan Symphony to reflect our broader reach way beyond the lake shore. The orchestra is now playing extremely well, but we're not stopping here. The experiment continues because we haven't quite reached Berlin Philharmonic levels. Now, if I could try to distill the secrets of our progress and success in such a way that could help Muskegon to thrive, here's what I would say. Number one, clearly we have an extremely high standard, and this standard goes up all the time. But the goal that we set should be the right goal. Just as the Grand Rapids Symphony was not an appropriate model for the West Michigan Symphony, so the city of Grand Rapids is not an appropriate model for the city of Muskegon. We have to think about that because far too often in my life here, I've heard people compare us to Grand Rapids. That's crazy. Grand Rapids has nothing like the lakeshore that we have here. Nothing. Just, you know, despite the murals at the Grand Rapids airport, I'm sorry, but it's not on the lakeshore. What we need to do is compare ourselves to a town that is on the lakeshore, that does it really, really well, that knows how to use its waterfront, and which has ideas galore that we can learn from. Of course, I'm talking about Chicago. Yes. Chicago, and look, Chicago and Muskegon started with exactly the same geographical elements, with the minor exception that we have much better beaches than they do. Right? So why don't we look at how they built up 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago? What have they done to allow the lakeshore to drive the success of that city? We need to do that. Next, we are very open-minded and flexible about how we achieve our goals. We never say that's how we've always done it, even though this organization is 70 years old. Tradition has its place, but we don't bow to tradition. There's a great saying by the astounding Italian maestro, Arturo Toscanini. Tradition is nothing more than everyone's vivid memory of the last bad performance. Keep that in mind. Next, we have a lot of enthusiasm for what we do. Everyone has enthusiasm in our organization. You have to be truly on board in order to be on board. And there's an interesting fact that if you look at the history of the world, probably every single visionary, leader, pioneer, in fact, anyone who's ever gotten anything done of substance in the world, has been to some extent an optimist. Pessimists, the corollary, is that pessimists and naysayers have no place. Once the direction is set, all they can do is hold you back. Eventually, they have to go. Think about this. In your organization or in Muskegon as a whole, once the direction is set, pessimists have to go. And to some extent, the success of any venture is correlated to the extent to which pessimists are let go. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And finally, we try to make ourselves indispensable to the community so that even in hard times, people would never be able to imagine a time without the West Michigan Symphony, and even in hard times, they'll support us. The way that Muskegon can become indispensable for the community, by the way, is by investing in its downtown. And I learned this from my brother, Jeff, who's a marvelous city planner. He's the one who told me that downtown is the only part of the city that belongs to everybody. Wherever you live, you have your neighborhood, and you have the downtown. and that's it. Furthermore, the image of any city is its downtown. It doesn't matter how fantastic a certain gated community might be. If the downtown doesn't look good, the image of the city doesn't look good, and you cannot feel positively about your city. Therefore, any investment in the city that's meant to help everyone and meant to become indispensable to its community needs to be in downtown. Now, yeah. Now, nobody cares about Muskegon more than you do. And I say you, and I also include the people watching on the internet, but I've been watching all day, and I have to tell you, to be honest, at no time with the number of people on the internet any more greater in number than the number of people in this room, the only time it spiked was for the cheese lady. So, so by and large, I'm talking to the people in this room. You are the ones who, more than anyone else in the world, want to see success for Muskegon. You know what that means? You have to move downtown. You have to move downtown, yeah. Now, look, join me in the Amazon, or come to the Watermark, or any one of these other buildings that are sprouting up. Demand better housing. Demand superb, top-notch grocery shopping. Demand better retail stores. Yeah, it'll only happen if you're living here. Who's going to listen to you guys if you're not actually putting your money where your mouth is and coming here? Demand great nightlife. You know, to turn a phrase around, if you come, they will build it. And I think you really, if you're serious about it, you have to move downtown. I'm serious. I did it. I've been here 8 years. I'm still alive and loving it. Okay. All right. One way that the West Michigan Symphony tries to become indispensable to the community is through the Carnegie Link-Up program. For the past 8 years, we've collaborated with Carnegie Hall in a marvelous program that educates young people in the basics of music and classical music. We give each child a recorder, and then during the entire school year, they learn how to play the recorder, and at the end of the year, they come to the Frauenthal Theater up here, 3,700 kids playing their melodies in unison with the West Michigan Symphony backing them up. Now, I can't tell you how many kids have told us this is the highlight of their lives, the highlight of their long lives so far. I'd like to bring in now 21 of these students from Ross Park and Churchill Elementary Schools, led by our education director, Karen van der Zanden. Now, they learn several melodies throughout the year, and maybe the simplest one they learn is called a simple melody, and it consists of 3 notes played in different combinations. So it's very short. Are you all in here? Come on, you can come in 2 rows if you need to. Come on forward. Yeah. Are you the last one? Yeah, okay, good. All right, Karen, take it away. All right. Thank you. Stay there. I invite all of you to come to our Carnegie Link-Up program, which is held in April of each year, in which you hear 3,700 kids doing this at once. It will bring a lump to your throat and a tear to your eye. But I want you to look at these 21 children, and for each one, I want you to imagine 1,000 because since we began this program 8 years ago, we have taught the recorder and music to 21,000 students in 52 elementary schools in 5 counties. It's one way in which we feel that a big idea in a small city can make a big difference. Thank you so much.